Born in Leningrad, now St. Petersburg, in October 1952, to a family that had suffered much in World War II, as had most Soviet families. Putin's father had been a conscript in the Red Navy before the war, serving on submarines, then in a Special Forces battalion of the NKVD, a forerunner to the KGB, then in an infantry unit until badly wounded in action. Putin's maternal grandmother had been killed by the Germans, and his maternal uncles all died fighting on the Eastern Front. Interestingly, Putin did have one link to the political leadership. His grandfather, who was Stalin's personal cook. Interested in martial arts and espionage from a young age, Putin was also a voracious reader of Marxist political theory and learned German as a second language. He studied international trade law at Leningrad State University and joined the KGB straight after graduation, also joining the Communist Party. Putin was selected for KGB training due to a new program organized by its head, Yuri Andropov, the intention being to get them young and train them to be more critical KGB officers instead of just recruiting former army officers. Putin, with his degree in international trade law and schoolboy fascination with espionage, was an ideal choice. Putin was trained at the 401st KGB school in Leningrad, learning surveillance techniques, spycraft, and weapons proficiency. It has been observed that Putin's distinctive gait, where his right hand barely swings, the so-called gunslinger's gait, demonstrates his old KGB weapons training has never left him, his hand never straying far from where his pistol was once kept. Eventually transferred to the first Chief Directorate, the KGB's Foreign Espionage Department, Putin's job was following and generally spying on foreigners in Leningrad, particularly diplomats from the various foreign consulates. His work was good, and in 1984 he was selected for further training at the Yuri Andropov Red Banner Institute in Moscow. He received specialist training preparatory to going overseas as a field agent. In 1985, Putin was transferred to KGB headquarters in Dresden, East Germany. His cover was as a translator, as he was fluent in German. But from the little that can be ascertained at this period in his life, Putin appears to have been helping to coordinate the infamous Red Army faction, a German terrorist group whose members received Stasi, that is, East German secret police protection. The KGB had about 50 officers attached to the Stasi to help advise them on operations, and one of them was Putin. Also known as the Baader-Meinhof Gang, the Red Army faction committed a series of terrorist outrages in Western Europe between 1970 and 1998, including 248 bomb and arson attacks. Though the founders were caught and imprisoned in West Germany in 1972, their followers continued operations, aided and abetted by the Stasi and the KGB. Putin appears to have been heavily involved in assisting the group as a way to destabilize West Germany, particularly in the provision of weapons to the group from Soviet sources. It has also been alleged that Putin was the KGB handler for Rainer Sonntag, a neo-Nazi who founded the National Resistance Dresden, and it was seen as a link to the West German neo-Nazi and skinhead scene. The KGB would help to fund any organization that would destabilize the West, including neo-Nazi groups. Sonntag ended up being shot to death in Dresden in 1991. Putin also operated as a spy in West Germany. He would cross at the famous Checkpoint Charlie in Berlin, often using the cover name Mr. Adamov, an employee of TASS, the official Soviet news agency. Some sources suggest that Putin was actually expelled from West Germany after being suspected of espionage activities in the capital, Bonn. Putin's other activities in East Germany included recruiting informers for the KGB, and in particular recruiting German wireless communications specialists who traveled often to Southeast Asia, but the extent of what he achieved is shrouded in secrecy to this day. Putin was twice decorated by East Germany for his intelligence work. In 1987, he received the Medal for Distinguished Service to the National People's Army of the GDR, Bronze class. and in 1988 the Medal of Merit, the National People's State Security of the GDR Gold class. Putin, by now a lieutenant colonel in the KGB, played an important part from the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989. As anti-communist demonstrations spread throughout East Germany, Putin managed to save the KGB files of the Dresden headquarters and the files of the Soviet Cultural Center. This material was shipped into Russia, while Putin and his subordinates burned anything they couldn't shift to prevent them from falling into Western hands. In 1989, Putin was decorated again with the Badge of Honor of the Supreme Soviet of the USSR for his service in the KGB. After this, Putin, who was a strong supporter of Mikhail Gorbachev, moved from the regular KGB to the active reserve in Leningrad in 1990, recruiting new men for the KGB from students at his old university, where he was also writing his doctoral thesis. The Soviet Union's days were now numbered. The 19th of August 1991, a coup d'etat was attempted in Moscow by hardliners trying to end President Gorbachev's progressive leadership program, and it would ultimately fail. Putin claimed he resigned from the KGB the next day, 20th of August, his loyalty to Gorbachev and the progressives. By this time, Putin was already acting as an advisor on international affairs to the mayor of Leningrad, his old friend, and followed this in 1991 by being appointed head of the Committee for External Relations. Putin was now well on the road to becoming a politician. It is a fact that many of the top men in Russia today are former KGB officers. Like Putin, they adapted to their country's changing fortunes and in many cases flourished in the new Russia, largely created by Putin. Some writers have even suggested that under Putin, the old warriors of the KGB have effectively taken over in Russia, and to some extent this appears to be true. This of course means that removing Putin from power will probably prove extremely difficult. Thanks for watching, please subscribe and share, and also visit my audiobook channel, War Stories with Mark Felton. You can also help to support both of my channels at PayPal and Patreon, details in the description box below.
Enemy destroyer.
Torpedoes to port. Torpedoes to port.
Team has taken the lead. We've sunk an enemy destroyer.
The combat capability of the People's Liberation Army, PLA, amounts to just a third of what it appears on the surface. Despite China's continuous modernization of its military arsenal, including aircraft carriers, stealth fighters, and destroyers, inherent issues such as formalism, internal corruption, and a lack of actual combat experience within the PLA significantly hinder the enhancement of its combat capabilities. Military analysts have pointed out that the actual military strength of the PLA may only be a third of its apparent strength. This year, China's stealth fighter J-20 was indeed equipped with the domestically produced WS-15 engine. However, the engine's lifespan is reportedly only a few hundred hours, far from the claimed 3,000 hours, and it consumes fuel at an exceptionally high rate. If flown in training exercises daily, the engine would require replacement within half a year. This not only increases maintenance costs, but also affects the J-20's sustained deployment capabilities. Moreover, there are concerns over whether China's annual production of aviation engines can meet such high-frequency replacement demands. Furthermore, when compared to Taiwan's F-16V, China's J-20 does not exhibit a clear advantage. The domestically produced onboard generators of the J-20 is underpowered, severely impacting the emission power of the aircraft's phased array radar. Inefficient radar output, coupled with the limitations of stealth design, may lead to the J-20 being detected first by the AN/APG-83 radar of the F-16V in aerial combat. Thus, whether the J-20 can outperform Taiwan's F-16V in actual combat remains uncertain. A recently released video by the Pentagon depicts a Chinese Air Force J-11 fighter jet intercepting a B-52 bomber, maneuvering within less than 3 meters of the bomber's front, rear, and bottom. This perilous flying behavior exposes the questionable professional caliber of PLA pilots. Given that the B-52's size and weight are almost 5 to 6 times that of the J-11, a collision would result in the certain destruction of the J-11. China's air defense missile systems are largely based on Russian designs or involve direct procurement of Russian weapons systems. The dismissal of former Chinese Defense Minister Li Shangfu was partly related to the procurement of the Russian S-400 air defense missile system to defend Beijing. However, the effectiveness of the S-400 system, which has failed to effectively intercept drones and Neptune missiles in Ukraine, is now in doubt. Questions also surround Li Shangfu's involvement in the procurement process, where he allegedly received substantial kickbacks from the Russian side. China's Navy has rapidly expanded its fleet in recent years, launching numerous new types of ships. However, there is a relative shortage of well-trained personnel capable of skillfully operating these new pieces of equipment, leading to the re-enlistment of retired naval officers. This raises questions about the real combat capabilities of these advanced ships. Though China's Type 055 destroyer has been touted as the world's strongest, its actual performance may only be comparable to the US Arleigh-Burke-class Flight 3 destroyers. This means that the Type 055 has achieved the performance level of the Arleigh-Burke-class Flight 3 destroyers, but with a size closer to the Ticonderoga-class cruisers, and it has been deployed several years later than its US counterpart. There was an incident reported where a Type 055 destroyer experienced severe electromagnetic interference when encountering a US warship, resulting in system failures and necessitating manual operation for target practice and maneuvering. Additionally, many Chinese naval vessels have performance and maintenance issues, often facing challenges when deployed on long-distance overseas missions. For example, during escort missions in the Gulf of Aden, security concerns prevented helicopter personnel from descending to escorted ships via ropes, and soldiers were hesitant to use gangways to board Navy ships. The fate of China's 3 aircraft carriers is also a cause for concern. Some believe that in the event of a conflict in China's relatively narrow territorial waters, these carriers could be sunk by the US military within a matter of hours. In submarine construction, China faces challenges as well. Most submarines use commercial ship parts from the West, which, despite outperforming domestically developed products in terms of performance, do not meet military standards and have capability issues. This has resulted in technical defects in the submarines, frequent malfunctions, constant need for repairs, and impaired seagoing capabilities. Reports indicate that some Chinese submarines, after many years of service, have an average annual mileage of only about 1,000 nautical miles, far below expectations. On August 21st, 55 officers and soldiers suffocated inside a Shang-class submarine. This tragedy was not solely due to technical issues within the PLA's submarines. Even with technically advanced U.S. submarines, similar outcomes could occur if operated and managed by the PLA. An insider revealed that the living quarters in submarines are extremely cramped, and if someone were to pass gas as a result of eating and it's detected by a superior, they would certainly face physical retribution. The food quality on submarines is even better than that in the Air Force, yet many soldiers are afraid to eat. After a month or two at sea, they all turn pale, and in such physical condition, how can they possibly be ready for combat? Insiders have also revealed that the strict hierarchical system and authoritative management by superiors can lead to unfair treatment and excessive work demands on soldiers, such as providing personal services to leaders. Even minor mistakes in work can result in severe criticism and punishment. Long-term service on submarines means isolation from society, and submarine personnel may worry about family matters and personal futures, such as rising housing prices and children. It is observed that the combination of various factors above might be leading to psychological states of suppression, anxiety, and distraction among soldiers, rendering them less effective in executing their tasks and potentially compromising the safe operation of submarines. The widely equipped 95 series of bullpup rifles in all 5 major branches of the Chinese military do not hold a distinct advantage on the international stage. Norinco Group, a Chinese state-owned defense corporation that manufactures commercial and military products, is striving to develop more advanced modular rifles, such as the American lightweight AR series or the Czech modular CZ-805. However, progress has been challenging. The domestically produced Type 03 rifle, commonly used by China's Special Forces and Marine Corps, cost a substantial 2.3 billion yuan to develop. However, it is essentially a piston-operated AK variant with a rail system. The NP-22 pistol produced by Norinco is a replica of the Sig Sauer P226. Under laboratory conditions, the NP-22 can withstand continuous firing of 2,000 rounds, but this falls significantly short when compared to the Sig P226 civilian version's capability to withstand 30,000 rounds of testing in general conditions. Additionally, the NP-22's performance is inferior to the P226, yet it is priced at nearly 20,000 yuan for the People's Liberation Army, whereas the P226 is available on the market for around $990 plus tax. Reflecting back to 2016, the quoted price for the P226 to the US military was just slightly above $300, at a time when its competitor, the Glock 19, was quoted at $270. Despite boasting nearly 1 million personnel in its land force, double that of the United States Army, the PLA claims to be the world's leading army. However, its troops are still armed with outdated Type 95 rifles, primarily operate old Type 59 main battle tanks, supplemented by some Type 96A tanks, and have extremely limited numbers of the most advanced Type 99A tanks. Many soldiers serve only 3 to 5 years, with long-term, non-commissioned officers often transferring to more comfortable support and strategic support units. With such equipment and levels of familiarity, it's questionable whether the PLA could withstand an attack from the US Army, let alone an airstrike. Facing the US Army, equipped with the superior M1 Abrams tank, the basis of PLA's claims to be the world's leading land force is dubious. In terms of combat capability, only the PLA's garrison troops in Beijing are considered satisfactory. However, these troops are not intended for warfare, but for maintaining stability in the capital, particularly in suppressing anti-government activities. Other parts of the army are mainly engaged in maintaining stability and countering rebellion outside of Beijing, protecting the red aristocracy and the powerful. At most, these forces participate in various military exercises and display new equipment. However, these activities are more likely aimed at showcasing power to the public, providing a sense of security, and do not represent their actual combat performance. Among the PLA's forces, the Rocket Force is considered the most capable. The Dongfeng missile series is frequently highly publicized. However, it seems to be overlooked that the US B-2 and B-21 bombers are designed to neutralize Dongfeng missile launchers. Therefore, the actual combat capability and counterattack potential of the Dongfeng missiles require a more realistic assessment. After all, there are no successful historical precedents of ground systems countering air forces. A PLA Major General revealed that the Chinese military has no intention of engaging in a large-scale naval battle to take Taiwan. The military coercion of Taiwan is merely propaganda. The PLA's only advantage lies in defending the mainland. Even in a conflict over Taiwan, the morale of the PLA troops would not be high, knowing they would be up against the world's most formidable military, the US Army, which is akin to a suicide mission. Due to Xi Jinping's directives, the PLA is demoralized and the prospect of being broke and ruined looms. Who would have the spirit to fight, especially considering that joining the military was initially seen as a way to save money, not to risk life and limb? Looking at the equipment, the PLA's armored vehicles can be damaged with mere stones, and there are doubts about the reliability of their firearms in battle. With the current state of the military, its capability to engage even North Korea in combat is questionable, let alone the United States or Japan. Currently, it is widely believed that the PLA's training level is even more outdated than its equipment. The training and assessment process tends to focus more on completing prescribed procedures and forms, lacking authenticity and practicality in live combat drills. In some large-scale live combat exercises, orders are completely issued by superiors, leaving soldiers merely waiting for commands and acting according to preset procedures. There was little opportunity for initiative and adaptability. Once the orders and procedures are all issued, the exercise is concluded, making the exercises seem easier than the training. In terms of physical training, some units place great emphasis and implement high-intensity and high-load training plans, such as long-distance running and challenging gymnastics exercises on the horizontal and parallel bars. However, this approach, akin to that of professional athletes, may overburden the soldiers' bodies, leading to long-term injuries and illnesses. As a result, while soldiers may excel in hand-to-hand combat, they may fall short in using firearms and implementing tactical maneuvers. Consequently, many veterans opt for careers as bodyguards, security guards, special agents, or urban law enforcement officers. In a light-hearted satirical piece, the abilities of soldiers in the Chinese People's Liberation Army are humorously depicted. It goes like this. After 2 years of service, the new recruits can only fist fight. After 5 years, they only know how to go for girls. After 8 years in the army, they can only boast and exaggerate. And finally, after 12 years, the veterans can clean the barracks thoroughly. And those who have stood their posts for 16 years have, as their greatest skill, a fiery temper. Next, we will examine the maintenance of Chinese military equipment and the stability of its armed forces. There is a stark contrast presented between the exorbitant maintenance cost of Chinese military equipment compared to their counterparts such as in Australia. The 056 type Corvette, for instance, costs substantially more to maintain in China than in Australia, a discrepancy partially attributed to the connections between Chinese maintenance contractors and high-ranking military officials. The maintenance costs of China's strategic missile forces also remain high. Annual radiation protection measurements and equipment inspections often result in recommendations to replace a large number of parts. The superiors think that if they don't replace the parts and something goes wrong, they might have to take responsibility. So they decide to go ahead with the replacements, considering that it is the government that foots the bill for new parts. This consumption, caused by systemic issues, is enormous and is also riddled with corruption. Under the current system, it is nearly impossible for mid-level military officers in China to get promoted to senior positions unless they are loyal party members and are able to establish good relationships with superiors. For junior officers to rise to the mid-level, it primarily involves buying military ranks. Positions like joining the party and becoming a deputy battalion commander are directly priced at 5,000 yuan. Those ordinary officers who are unwilling to buy their way up prefer to transfer to local positions. If given the opportunity to transfer among 10 officers, 60% of those who are less competent than non-commissioned officers, NCOs, would choose to leave. 80% of those on par with NCOs would be willing to leave, and an astounding 90% of those more competent than NCOs would opt to leave. In technical units, performances are subpar in basic network operations and in writing simple web crawlers. Many technically skilled NCOs are unwilling to stay in such an environment. Officers with technical backgrounds are busy studying for legal and accounting qualifications, always ready to leave the military. There are severe issues with the combat readiness and professional capabilities of China's military command departments. When formulating combat plans, there is a lack of originality and adaptability, and even attempts to imitate US military plans are not effectively applied. This pursuit of form over substance has not only persisted since Xi Jinping came to power, but has worsened. The biannual Democratic Life Meetings, the monthly Study the Powerful Country initiative, and political activities around the Red Gene are gradually eroding the dedication of pragmatic individuals within the military who do not favor party affairs. While military salaries have increased, bribery has decreased, and discipline within the People's Liberation Army has strengthened, it has become even more difficult to get things done. Insiders believe that the overall efficiency and pragmatism of the Chinese military may even be lower than that of the Indian Army. In 2022, China's defense budget reached 1.45 trillion yuan, equivalent to approximately 224.8 billion US dollars, which amounts to the total of China's annual consumption tax, personal income tax, and stamp duty. However, the efficiency and allocation of the military budget have drawn external attention. The specific allocation of military funds is decided by the Central Military Commission, and once the funds are distributed, the leaders of the various field armies have absolute control over these funds. Typically, part of the funds are used to maintain a model military unit, which could be a division or a regiment in size. However, the remaining troops operate under financial strain. New recruits in remote areas receive a monthly salary of over 4,000 yuan, while soldiers stationed on the India border can earn as much as 12,000 yuan per month. The monthly salary of the lowest-ranking platoon leaders can reach 8,000 yuan. The yearly resettlement costs for officers above the company and battalion levels are also substantial, including transfer payments, various subsidies, resettlement funds, and even housing allocations. Beyond these visible expenditures, the misuse and corruption of military funds within the field armies are serious issues. It is said that if a section chief at a field army headquarters cannot be found to have embezzled at least 100 million RMB, they are considered clean. When procuring weapons, the prices are far higher than comparable American equipment, but the quality of the domestically produced weapons is inferior to Russian replicas. A cooking spoon on the aircraft carrier Liaoning costs as much as 3,500 yuan, almost 478 US dollars to buy, with most of the inflated price being kickbacks, primarily used to ingratiate themselves with leaders, and a small portion used for personal relationships and private expenses. At least half of the research funding is embezzled, and even for the most advanced weapons and equipment, generals often do not know how to use them, let alone formulate effective tactics and strategies. Insiders estimate that hidden military spending could be more than twice the official budget. The internal corruption reduces the effectiveness of seemingly advanced weapons and equipment by at least half in actual combat. Commanders who have bought their ranks with money often lack the command ability to handle complex battlefield situations and might even lead their subordinates into perilous situations. Moreover, in the event of an unpredictable emergency, the combat effectiveness of the Chinese military could collapse instantaneously. One might try to test this by using the Dongfeng missile series and newly produced warships to attempt a military landing on the Diaoyu Islands and see if they can outperform Japan, which does not even have a regular army.
A Chinese Type 96B tank experienced a wheel dislodgement and track failure during the International Army Games 2020 in Russia. eliciting laughter from the audience. The Russian commentator remarked, "What happened? Let's take a look. We can see what's happening. Everyone take a look. Almost on the sprocket. Yes. Did everyone see the wheel? The wheel fell off. The Chinese tank is falling apart. It's a complete disaster." In another instance of military equipment issues, Russia faced setbacks with a batch of Chinese-imported Desert Cross 1003 all-terrain vehicles on the Ukrainian battlefield. These vehicles, struck and severely damaged by the Ukrainian military, have become a focal point in debates over the performance capabilities of Chinese military equipment. Russia has reportedly procured 537 units of this model and plans to receive an additional 1,590 units by April 24, 2024. Although capable of carrying 550 kilograms of cargo and a 300-kilogram trailer, it was noted that the vehicle had limited defense against harsh weather and enemy fire due to inadequate protective measures. Questions remain about the origin of its components and its dependency on 92-octane gasoline, as well as doubts about its effectiveness in challenging muddy frontline terrains. Russia has managed to circumvent international sanctions to purchase these vehicles from China because they were classified as civilian rather than standard military equipment. In response to the poor performance of land vehicles, China has shifted to supplying large quantities of ammunition to Russia. Vladimir Putin has boasted that Russia's production of 155mm ammunition is 10 times that of the United States. This claim has raised concerns in the US, leading to speculations that Russia's production capacity is unlikely to have increased so rapidly without external assistance. Indeed, prior to Xi Jinping's visit to Russia on March 20th this year, US officials confirmed that ammunition used by Russia in Ukraine contained Chinese components. By June, US media revealed more details about the Chinese military aid in terms of ammunition. Reports mentioned a trainload of tens of tons of smokeless powder crossing the China-Russia border at the end of last year, enough to produce at least 80 million rounds of ammunition. This powder was transported to the Barnaul ammunition plant in central Russia, with the supplier being China's state-owned Poly Technologies. This crucial information was first disclosed through US trade data aggregator Import Genius. Further investigation revealed that the powder, including type T125 propellant, worth approximately $2 million, originated from a chemical industry company in Sichuan, China. Although the powder was ostensibly disguised as a civilian product, its export would have required special approval from the Central Military Commission of China, indicating official Chinese military support for Russia. The US identified the Chinese origin of the ammunition based on unique components in the formulations used by the Chinese military. For instance, Lude Media, an overseas Chinese self-media outlet, disclosed that Chinese-made 7.62 by 54mm ammunition contained distinctive components like double-base nitro-11 and stabilizer number 2, unique to Chinese ammunition. These unique components enabled the US to trace the origins of ammunition used on the Ukrainian battlefield. Lude Media also revealed challenges China faced in mimicking American ammunition formulations. China replicated the US's passivation technique used before mixing gunpowder to prevent accidental explosions. However, they discovered that bullets failed to fire properly due to the substandard quality of the initiators used by China. Consequently, China cautiously proceeded with the gunpowder production process, using wet granulators for mixing to avoid explosion risks. Furthermore, the production lines in China frequently face static electricity issues, increasing risks and casualties during ammunition production. China's provision of military equipment and supplies to Russia also occurs through more complex and covert means. A report by The Washington Post on April 10th disclosed a secret operation by Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi to produce and covertly transport up to 40,000 rockets to Russia while keeping the operation secret to avoid angering Western allies. The chemical ingredients for these rockets, manufactured at a plant known as Factory 18, actually originated from China. This unveils China's influence in countries like Egypt, Algeria, Kazakhstan, and Uzbekistan, which have become transit hubs for Chinese military aid to Russia. Wang Yi, China's foreign minister, visited Egypt and Algeria in 2021. This meeting was potentially linked to this strategic arrangement. South Africa and its neighboring countries also play significant roles in the network of Chinese military aid. South Africa's Paramount Group, specializing in armored vehicles, has collaborated with Kazakhstan to provide military equipment to Russia. China's significant influence in South Africa, through investments and ownership in local arms factories and leveraging countries with close ties to China, such as Uganda and Zimbabwe, provides low-cost raw materials. South Africa's status as a former Commonwealth nation with a relatively neutral international image makes it an ideal location to circumvent Western oversight, especially in military assistance. In the aviation sector, China's support for Russia has been significant. Just 4 days after the outbreak of the war in Ukraine, the Chinese company HEMS 999 provided 2 helicopters to Russia. Additionally, Tianjin Huarong Aviation transferred 4 Airbus helicopters to Russia, which were given to the Russian Ural Helicopter Company, the main supplier to the Russian National Guard deployed in Ukraine. This transaction indicates that, despite being ostensibly commercial, these helicopters play a crucial role in Russia's military operations. Regarding unmanned aerial vehicles, China's assistance is also noteworthy. According to data from the open-source research organization Molfar Global, a company based in Shantou, China, sent 1,000 drones to Russia 2 months before the war. While the company promotes itself as a children's toy wholesaler on its website and social media, the Russian recipient company, Samsung, also presents itself as a toy wholesaler. However, the actual use of these drones is far from their superficial identity. Analysis of Russian customs data by Nikkei News shows that on February 1, 2023, Russia's Status Compliances Company imported 3 drones with a takeoff weight between 25 and 150 kilograms from Shenzhen Kushin Intelligent Development Company, totaling nearly $90,000. Although these drones were described as civilian models in customs records, they were explicitly marked for special military operations purposes. Tomoyuki Furutani, a drone expert from Keio University, points out that these large drones can be used for military reconnaissance and potentially modified for attacks. Additionally, small drones produced by China's DJI company are widely used for military reconnaissance and dropping small bombs. These drones are mainly imported through Central Asia, Belarus, and the Middle East, friendly countries to Russia, under the guise of civilian products. However, at least 37 drones were explicitly marked as for special military operations in customs records during the first 4 months of this year, totaling approximately $103,000. According to data from the Observatory of Economic Complexity, China's drone exports to Russia in 2022 were valued at $23 million. These drones are equipped with satellite communication and encryption systems and have complex password control mechanisms. Even the smallest drones have the capability to drop grenades, highlighting their practical application in military operations. This is widely regarded on the international stage as obvious military assistance from China to Russia. In the field of metal materials, China's support for Russia is equally significant. In 2022, China's titanium alloy exports to Russia reached $18 million, almost double the previous year. These key materials, including titanium plates and rods, were sent to Russian anti-aircraft missile launcher developer NPP Start and aircraft maintenance company S7 Technics. Furthermore, China delivered magnesium alloy to Tupolev, which is responsible for manufacturing and maintaining Tu-95 and Tu-160M long-range bombers, used for cruise missile attacks in the Ukraine conflict. Interestingly, shipments of alumina from China to Russia increased more than 25 times over the previous year in 2022. Alumina is widely used in producing armored vehicles, personal protective equipment, bulletproof shields, missile casings, bullets, explosives, and propellants. Additionally, the manufacturer of the Kamaz Typhoon armored vehicle, Magnitogorsk Iron and Steel Works, has received at least 520 batches of spare parts, welding machines, and laser lathes from China. This further confirms China's involvement in Russian military equipment manufacturing. Some Chinese companies, such as Wuxi, Tianxing Steel, and Xi'an Alpha Metal, have offices in Moscow and showcase images of fighter jets and naval ships on their Russian websites, directly reflecting their active role in meeting Russia's military needs. In the export of optical sites, China's role is also significant. Since early 2022, China has sent a large number of optical sites to over 50 companies in Russia, doubling last year's import value to $2.5 million. Data from Molfar, obtained from the Chinese trade company 52WMB, shows that Yiwu, Wojie Optical Instruments, supplied about 2,500 optical sites to Russia's CEK company. Though these products were marked for hunting on the invoices, they can be fitted on military weapons. Molfar's research also reveals that Chinese exports of turbojet engines and radar-guided missile navigation systems are typically transshipped through India and Costa Rica to Russia. Additionally, as reported by Politico on July 24th, Russian buyers have ordered hundreds of thousands of bulletproof vests and helmets from Shanghai H-Win Company, sufficient to equip the large number of personnel Russia has mobilized since invading Ukraine. China-Russia customs data shows that the export of ceramic materials used to make bulletproof vests from China to Russia increased by 69% during the same period, totaling over $225 million. Notably, Silva, a company located in a remote area of eastern Siberia, filed a declaration in January for an order of 100,000 bulletproof vests and 100,000 helmets from Shanghai H-Win. The company was immediately dissolved after completing the transaction to evade international sanctions. According to a report by the Washington Post on April 13th, a leaked confidential document from the U.S. Department of Defense revealed that the U.S. successfully eavesdropped on Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service (SVR) and obtained key intelligence. These intelligence reports, submitted to the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, show that the Central Military Commission of the CCP secretly approved an increase in lethal military aid to Russia, seeking to maintain the secrecy of this operation. The document marked top secret reveals that the CCP tried to disguise its military support to Russia as civilian goods, including disassembled ammunition and raw materials. These materials were routed through Egypt, Algeria, South Africa, and other countries, eventually assembled in Belarus, Kazakhstan, and Uzbekistan, and then secretly transported to Russia. The export of all these military supplies, whether approved by China's Central Military Commission or the General Equipment Department, was fully managed by China's state-owned defense corporation, the North Industries Group Corporation. These developments underscore the intricate and multifaceted nature of the intelligence and trust dynamics between China and Russia. Xi Jinping has always wanted his decisions to remain absolutely confidential, known only to himself. However, the leak reported by the Washington Post reveals a significant fact. Some of Xi Jinping's key decisions may have been known to Russia, and this information may have been deliberately or inadvertently passed to the US. This not only exposes potential trust issues between China and Russia, but could also lead to a change in Xi Jinping's strategic considerations towards Russia. He may be contemplating whether the CCP's secret efforts to weaken or influence Russia's strategic capabilities are already known to Russia.
On January 16, 2024, Pakistan discovered that its China-made radar systems failed to effectively respond to an Iranian ballistic missile attack during a night encounter. This incident has led to a significant disappointment within the Pakistani military towards their long-term ally, China. Despite Pakistan's substantial acquisition of Chinese weapons and assisting China in weapons production to support Russia, China did not publicly express support towards Pakistan during this attack. Additionally, China's failure to condemn Iran's aggressive actions in Iraq has angered the Arab League, a coalition of Sunni Islamic nations. They strongly condemned Iran's actions, and Pakistan responded with a more robust counterattack. These developments could lead to a complete diplomatic failure for China in the Middle East, especially in its attempts at self-perceived positive diplomatic mediation. In the Iranian missile attack of 2024, China's HQ-9P and HQ-16 air defense systems, deployed in the 127 Medium Air Defense Regiment located in Baluchistan province, faced a severe test in actual combat. The HQ-9, a replica of the S-300 PMU-2, was supposed to intercept targets effectively within a range of 200 kilometers. The HQ-16, a medium and short-range air defense missile, was supposed to operate effectively within 50 kilometers. However, in the face of real battlefield combat, these advanced Chinese radar and air defense systems were rendered virtually blind. A person who had previously worked on tuning Chinese radar systems revealed shocking facts on a technical forum. Even aircraft visible to the naked eye often went undetected by Chinese radar systems, providing direct evidence of China's shortcomings in radar and air defense technology. Highlighting the issue further, China itself has been purchasing the Russian S-400 system, ironically underscoring its own technological shortcomings and showing a willingness to sell flawed military equipment to allies, which betrays the trust of its ally Pakistan. Was Pakistan unaware of this? Evidently, Pakistan's primary motive for purchasing Chinese-made weapons was cost-effectiveness, with smaller equipment like rifles and RPGs from China being of acceptable quality. However, even these smaller arms have had issues, such as the 2017 incident where some HJ-8 anti-tank missiles deviated from their targets and failed to penetrate the tanks during live fire exercises. Investigations by the Pakistani Army revealed problems with the missile's warhead quality, body structure, and guidance head that affected the flight stability, accuracy, and lethality. As for the larger equipment imported from China, such as armored vehicles, tanks, ships, fighter jets, and radars, the problems are multifaceted. Notably, the VT-4 main battle tank, one of the primary equipment of the Pakistani Army, encountered severe oil leakage issues during testing and field firing trials in February 2022. The engine leaked oil along with the oil pump, shock absorbers, transmission box, and the entire drivetrain system. Key components like the engine, transmission box, and steering pump showed severe quality issues. Furthermore, the Beidou navigation satellite system, developed by Chinese National Space Administration, which is equipped in the VT-4 main battle tank, was unreliable in signal reception, and the anti-aircraft gun's aiming scope was also problematic. Following the issues encountered, China North Industries Group Corporation Limited, Norinco, the main contractor, and its subcontractors, which include the 201, 616, and 617 factories, engaged in a blame game, shirking responsibility. The situation was further exacerbated by the shortcuts and inferior workmanship resulting from layered kickbacks. Nevertheless, through under-the-table deals, China managed to have Pakistan accept the batch of tanks. The core issue behind the leakage in the Chinese-produced tanks lies in the manufacturing of the tank's power compartment. Although Chinese manufacturers refer to German designs, the lack of original materials and expertise led to the final product not meeting the design standards. Particularly in the engine and transmission parts, the use of civilian components jointly produced by German and Austrian companies exacerbated the oil leakage issue. Despite attempts to solve the problem by adding extra holes, this temporary solution failed to fundamentally address the leakage, resulting in at least 9 out of 10 engines leaking oil. The major components of these tanks were produced in China, with the 616 factory in Shanxi responsible for the engines and the 617 factory for the bearings. After the initial assembly was done by Inner Mongolia First Machinery Group Company Limited, these parts were sent to Pakistan for final assembly on the VT-4 and MBT-2000 tank production lines. China's ability to produce these parts largely benefited from advanced equipment provided by Germany, the United States, and Japan over the past decades, inadvertently boosting China's military equipment manufacturing capabilities. China's military support to Pakistan extends to the naval domain as well. In 2005, the two countries signed an agreement for the purchase of 4 F-22P frigates, all delivered by 2013. However, these frigates have shown numerous technical issues in operation. The 76mm rapid-fire naval guns frequently jammed, radar systems were prone to malfunction, and the air defense and anti-ship missile systems had imaging issues that hindered accurate targeting. Most critically, the power systems of these frigates had severe technical flaws, directly impacting their combat effectiveness and navigational capabilities. In aerial combat, the JF-17 Thunder fighter jets purchased by Pakistan from China also faced a series of technical issues. Since their delivery in 2007, their radar systems, copied from Russia's N010 Zhuk ME, were at a disadvantage in air combat due to limited detection range and accuracy. The onboard electronic warfare systems, modeled after Russia's L-150 Lyra, were underperforming and struggled in complex electronic warfare environments. The JF-17's low thrust-to-weight ratio impacted its maneuverability, especially in close-range air combat. The safety issues were also significant, with several crashes causing pilot casualties. The problems with the JF-17 did not end there. Its avionics system had low integration and was complex to operate. The aircraft's structural strength was insufficient, and maintenance costs were high. Its limited variety of weapon systems restricted its combat capabilities. Despite multiple improvement requests from the Pakistan Air Force, specific upgrade plans for the JF-17 have yet to materialize. These accumulating issues highlight the risks of Pakistan's military reliance on China and the potential impact on future military cooperation. On July 14, 2022, Luda Media exposed that the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, was utilizing overseas factories in countries like Pakistan to produce military equipment, including missiles and armored vehicles, aiming to evade U.S. sanctions. These equipment were sold to Russia and terrorist organizations in the Middle East, such as the Houthi rebels. Intelligence reports indicate that a year and a half later, all these parties, including Pakistan and the Houthis, have significantly participated in terrorist activities in the Middle East. A report from Norinco mentioned that their collaboration with Pakistan's National Engineering and Scientific Commission, NESCOM, began with a $2.86 million project for assembling GS-1 sensor-fused munitions. These munitions, also known as sensor-fused munitions for 155mm artillery, are high-tech explosives capable of detecting and exploding toward a target at the end of their trajectory. Reports suggest that a significant number of this type of munitions was used in the Russia-Ukraine conflict and that they were actually produced by China. The cooperation with Pakistan also included the DK-10, also known as the Tianlong-50 air defense missile system, a medium-range surface-to-air missile system from Norinco with components produced in China and assembled in Pakistan. Considering the massive production volume of these lines, it's clear that they are not just to satisfy Pakistan's domestic needs. While supporting the Russia-Ukraine war, this was also a strategic move by the CCP to prepare for possible conflicts with the United States, ensuring an ample supply of ammunition and equipment in case of strikes on arms factories and strategic targets. Meanwhile, other countries purchasing Chinese-manufactured military hardware have discovered similar quality issues. The Myanmar military regime, which purchased the JF-17 Thunder fighter jets co-produced by China and Pakistan, had to ground most of these aircraft 4 years after their delivery in 2018 due to complex weapon control systems, limited access to components and bombs, and inadequate radar precision. The Royal Jordanian Air Force and the Bangladesh Air Force have also encountered similar quality issues. Compared to the United States and Russia, China generally lags in areas related to engines, electronic equipment, and composite materials, resulting in poorer performance of Chinese-manufactured weapons. Countries like Pakistan and Bangladesh continue to choose these weapons primarily to maintain good diplomatic relations with China, coupled with the low cost of Chinese weapons. Even if the price is a discount compared to the American and Russian weapons, officials and middlemen still manage to take a cut in the form of bribes. The CCP can control prime ministers, parliamentarians, and other key political figures through bribes, threats, or other means to ensure China's interests are advanced in these countries. CCP enterprises involved in such transactions, including Norinco, Aviation Industry Corporation of China, China State Shipbuilding Corporation, Jiangnan Shipyard, Huawei, and others, all follow the same operational pattern. Countries like Pakistan, Myanmar, Thailand, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Angola, and Kuwait face these issues. In arms deals, the project leaders will, in collaboration with senior CCP spies in the local area, influence and manipulate the political elite of various countries. For example, they might use a parliamentarian spouse or lover to extend their influence. Media spies then cooperate in propaganda, creating public opinion to facilitate the passage of weapon procurement bills. Moreover, CCP agents also collaborate with agents from neighboring countries to create conflicts and tensions, further promoting arms sales. If any official or political figure obstructs the CCP's plans, they will use compromising material or other means to deal with the opposition. Bribes to officials and generals are secretly stored, ensuring their loyalty and providing security for their successors. Faced with the issues of military hardware quality and manipulation of Pakistani high-level officials, Pakistan began to reassess its military cooperation with China. This reassessment was particularly spurred by the influx of numerous Afghan government personnel into Pakistan following the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan in 2021. These individuals, having amassed considerable wealth during the U.S.'s 20-year anti-terrorism campaign in Afghanistan, wielded significant influence in Pakistan. The dissatisfaction among these former Afghan officials in Pakistan's high echelons grew when China was the first to recognize the Taliban regime. Pakistan's political landscape underwent significant changes in 2022. During the Ukraine war, despite aligning with China's stance, Pakistan experienced intense internal political turmoil, leading to the parliamentary ousting of former Prime Minister Imran Khan due to domestic instability. His successor, Prime Minister Sharif, quickly mended ties with the West and supported Ukraine's sovereignty. His policies included airstrikes in Afghanistan, showing close alignment with U.S. policy. Meanwhile, Pakistanis, who profited from cooperation with China, were arrested on corruption charges. At this time, the Afghan population in Pakistan is preparing to launch a counterattack in Afghanistan with support from the United States, which possibly included the condition of Pakistan serving as a base for attacks against Iran. This backdrop set the stage for Iran's attack. On January 16, 2024, Iran launched a ballistic missile airstrike on Pakistan under the guise of counterterrorism, to which Pakistan responded forcefully. On January 17, Pakistan launched a fierce attack with missiles, fighter jets, and drones on 7 locations in Iran's southeastern Baluchistan province. The Pakistan Civil Aviation Authority instructed domestic flights to avoid Iranian airspace, using the airspace corridor over Oman, escalating the tension between the two nations. For further retaliation, Pakistan initiated a military operation named Marbar Samakhar on January 18th, accurately striking suspected terrorist hideouts in Iran's Baluchistan region, which resulted in multiple terrorist casualties. During this period, Iran and Pakistan engaged in mutual recriminations through the media. Iran claimed its attack on Pakistan was to eliminate terrorists, while Pakistan used the same justification for its counterstrike against Iran, emphasizing respect for Iran's sovereignty in diplomatic statements. This mutual blame game intensified the tension between the two countries with no end in sight. Iran then conducted military exercises near the Pakistan border, hinting at potential military actions. In this series of events, China, as a long-term ally of Pakistan, remained neutral and instead attempted to persuade Pakistan to forego retaliation. However, Pakistan's unyielding retaliation, including the assassination of a senior colonel of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, indicated its discontent with China and a pivot towards the United States. The situation at the Pakistan-Iran border, with massive troop deployments and fighter jet patrols, suggested an imminent outbreak of war. Ali Khamenei's decision to attack Pakistan and Iraq may have been influenced by China's prior assurance of handling Pakistan. However, the current situation deviated entirely from the expectations of China and Khamenei, leading to probable regret on Khamenei's part. A factor overlooked by China is that the anti-American, anti-Western, and anti-liberal sentiment in the Islamic world mainly originates from the ruling class to maintain control over the faithful. What fundamentally drives Islamic nations into conflict with one another is the intrinsic sectarian discord and long-standing historical disputes prevalent in the Islamic world, such as the disputes between Shia and Sunni Muslims and the long-standing Arab animosity towards Turks. The schism between the Shia and Sunni branches of Islam dates back to the succession issue following the death of the Prophet Muhammad in 632 AD. This rift and subsequent political struggles have led to long-standing conflicts between the two major sects. Additionally, the 7th century Arab conquest of Persia and the subsequent prolonged rule of the Ottoman Turks over Arab lands have deepened ethnic animosities. After World War II, the United States established an international order based on democracy and rule of law in the Middle East, which to some extent maintained a balance in the region and prevented large-scale sectarian conflicts. Under this framework, the U.S. approach towards Iran primarily involved sanctions, avoiding direct military intervention, thus preventing sectarian conflicts from escalating into full-scale ethnic genocide. In contrast, the policies of the CCP in the region have shown clear limitations. By opposing the U.S., the CCP has exacerbated the conflict between Shia and Sunni Muslims in Iran. Pakistan, having recognized the true nature of the CCP and Iran, is now poised to launch a land invasion into Iran. In the Sunni Islamic world, notably in Arab countries, there is a growing realization that Iran is part of an axis of evil with the CCP and Russia, and other nations like Pakistan and Iraq are merely pawns of the CCP. In the future, Sunni-majority Islamic nations like Indonesia and Malaysia might also join in this stance. Looking ahead, the Arab League might adopt comprehensive sanctions against the CCP, similar to the European Union. Meanwhile, the free world is executing a series of multi-threaded, highly confidential missions to weaken the influence of China, Russia, and Iran. These missions include supporting the election of specific political figures, subverting regimes in certain countries, and instigating regional conflicts, all aimed at countering the CCP's influence on the international stage. Examples include Chai Ling-te's electoral victory in Taiwan, manipulation of influence in Serbia, provoking Iran's missile attack, and Pakistan's counterattack against Iran all contribute to this strategy. Preparations for a ground attack on Iran are underway, spelling inevitable defeat for the CCP. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has led Ukraine and the European Union to fully recognize the CCP's nature, resulting in comprehensive EU sanctions against China. Hamas's terrorist attacks on Israel
I don't remember watching it. Did it disappear already? I think it did. Son of a bitch. Yeah. Bastards. What the f-
Hello noble ones, welcome back to my channel. This is the Metatron speaking, and I would like to begin by saying that this is not a debunking video of Invicta's work. Invicta does excellent research on his documentaries and I have zero animosity towards him. So absolutely go check him out, and if you like what you see, subscribe. This is a response video to deep dive into a topic, the concept of racism, discrimination and racial perception when it comes to population subsets in ancient Rome, which I believe is easily prone to modernism, societal projection and misunderstanding. I am of course aware that this is a 3-year-old video I'm responding to, but I see no updates from him, so I take it that he still holds the information here to be 100% valid. Now, by and large, I agree with him and what he presents for a good 80% of the video, but there are some key elements and fundamental statements that, if I understand them correctly, I strongly disagree with, and I would like to address them here. Not as a way to correct him per se, but to open a debate and trigger new reflections upon these discursive fields in the spirit of discussion and mutual cooperation. Moreover, this is the past of my country we're talking about, so I'd like to see it represented in the best way and most accurate way possible. With that being said, hello Invicta, and let's deep dive. In your otherwise really good video, there are still 3 main items I'd like to cover, which I think either require more expansion or might need to be readdressed entirely. Race and racial perception, where we'll be confronting Roman racial exclusionary practices in the acquisition and analysis of socio-historical data, the cosmopolitan phenomena in classical urban areas, and finally some points about slavery, which I will be addressing from the perspective of the classical socioeconomic strata.
When we ask, what did the Romans think about race? We're doing so based on our own modern framing of that term. Today, race generally gets equated to one's physical appearance, and in particular, skin color. Humans have always had ways of distinguishing in versus out groups, and it just so happens that our own has its seeds in the 16th to 18th centuries with the age of exploration, the conquest of the New World, and the expansion of the transatlantic slave trade. The idea of race we have today is a product of this recent shift.
See, this assertion rests on the assumption that racism based on phenotypic variance is a modern construct. I respectfully beg to differ.
So what came before? Humans have also long had observable physical differences for thousands of years, which our ancestors were certainly not blind to. It's just that in the past, people had to rely on a more broad range of indicators for how to group individuals. Rather than the physical, this ended up being the cultural.
While I agree with the general idea that modern racism is different from ancient racism, I'm adamant that the connections between culture and racist behavior should be laid out through non-modern, culturally invasive inference. In other words, my take on this idea that you propose that racism in ancient Rome was not based on your look, but it was based on your culture, is a form of modernism and therefore ultimately flawed. You do repeat it 3 times on your video, so I feel like that's the core message you want people to take home.
Rather than the physical, this ended up being the cultural. Again, racial ideas were tied more to one's culture rather than one's appearance. with the main takeaway being that race in antiquity was more about culture than appearance.
So, the question is there a causal link between physical appearance and racial discrimination in ancient Rome, particularly when associated with societal trajectories of discriminatory behavior in the sources? Well, the answer is that there absolutely is a documented correlation between physical characteristics, specifically appearance, and discrimination when it comes to social feedback in Rome. Now, certain discrimination patterns have always existed, and this is a conjecture on my part, but I'll go as far as to say that implicit discriminatory beliefs and racial disparities based on your looks, which exacerbated social issues, have existed since prehistoric tribalism. And the phenotypic differences that we perceive as indicators, such as skin pigmentation, hair texture, body composition, sweat gland density, do appear throughout human interaction on a continuum. It is my belief that these indicators still deeply affected the lived experiences of individuals in ancient Rome, even if in a different manner than today. The ancient Romans were indeed a people of sophisticated philosophical paradigms, and surely I agree with you that their discrimination was not uniquely based on people's appearances, but the physical aspect is also part of it. And the other part is not just cultural, but it's rather political, which is the sphere that justifies discriminatory behavior in their minds. And then, after having said this, you proceed to read from Architectura Book 6, a paradox in your thesis, if you will.
This is the reason why the people of the North are so large in
Jedi,
stature,
honored.
so light in
Flight Commander
complexion,
Jordan,
and have
Republic
straight red
Navy.
hair, blue eyes, and are
Red
full
is-
of blood, for they are thus formed by the abundant
Others attacking Republic assets in secret, goading us into violating the Treaty of Coruscant.
What's the Treaty of Coruscant?
The peace agreement between the Republic and the Empire. Our scraps with the Imps need to stay away from major worlds, for now. Fleet Admiral Newman has authorized the formation of the Coruscant Aegis, an elite attack squadron meant to break the Imperial offensive swiftly and quietly. If you're interested, I'd say you're more than qualified to join the squadron.
I would be honored to fly with the Coruscant Aegis.
Excellent, Master Jedi. Every pilot needs a call sign. I think Guardian suits you best. Every member of the Coruscant Aegis will strike independently across the galaxy. I'll upload your mission data to your ship. Silence the Imperial threat, and guard the Republic well.
Fucking surrounded by a bunch of fucking nut jobs. Jesus fuck me Christ.
of the moisture and the coldness of their country. Those who live near the equator and are exactly under the sun's course are, owing to its power, low in stature, of dark complexion, with curling hair, black eyes, weak legs, deficient in quantity
Why
of
the
blood.
fuck
And this
can I just
deficiency of blood
travel somewhere
makes them
without
timid when opposed in battle.
So, am I saying that this interpretation of the world and its people that we read in Architectura Book 6 is racist the same way as racism was conceived in 18th century or 19th century? No, of course not. If anything, it's a sort of environmental determinism, so to speak. It does create stereotypes, and it absolutely is based on your physical appearance.
You've landed on
as
Nar
well
Shaddaa.
as
Nar
your
Shaddaa.
mental and cultural ones. This ancient analysis treating the environment as a key factor influencing
Surely
human
someone must
condition,
stand up to
mental
this hut cartel.
predisposition, and physical
The
appearance
cartel
emphasizes
deals
the fact
badly
that the
with
ancient
those who
used
say
a type
no.
of theoretical
But now,
methodology which
despite
used to
its
test for
power,
environmental
is clashing with a new group called the Guiding Hand. The Guiding Hand's followers are fanatically loyal to an unknown leader. I believe this leader is Doris Fane, one of the missing Jedi Masters.
Blind obedience to a secret leader. If it is Fane, he's got the makings of an army.
That is my fear. Fane is an undisciplined maverick, but he has great charisma, incredible skill at influencing others through the Force. This Guiding Hand has attacked cartel's spice shipments, operations Fane despises, in a way that shouts Fane's tactics. It's him. I know it.
Ill or not, he's right about opposing the Hutt cartel.
Even fighting the Guiding Hand, the cartel is immensely powerful, second only to the Republic and the Empire. So far, the Hutt cartel has tolerated, even aided the Republic. But if it discovers a rogue Jedi is hurting business...
The Hutts might even strike against the Jedi over this.
My concern is less for the Order than for the Republic. We must find Fane before the Hutt cartel discovers his involvement. I have a contact on Nar Shaddaa who can help you, named Theron Cedrix. Theron is a professor of exotechnology. He was once a friend of mine and of Fane's.
That's not a science I'm familiar with.
Theron specializes in technology thought to originate outside the galaxy itself. Fascinating and quite over my head. Theron has offices on Nar Shaddaa's promenade. He's usually there, if he's not nurturing his genius in a casino. Good luck. And don't underestimate Doris Fane, Jedi. His gifts of persuasion are unsurpassed.
I hope you eat properly while away from the ship, Master. Perhaps I should create non-perishable meals to send with you. I promise nothing less than perfection, Master.
data as a quantitative information pattern to justify and explain biological transformation in human subgroups and societies. Of course, it's not like the Romans had access to DNA or isotope analysis, but for the purposes of this video it does show that they were absolutely fixated on physical appearances. So the question is, could these studies and theories and ideas be used as a form of discriminatory pattern? Well, you answer that when you quote Vitruvius. It is, however, very difficult to defend a solid demarcation between cultural racism and physical racism when you read the sources. There is also a very famous incident when it comes to Emperor Septimus Severus and his negative reaction when he saw
Jedi.
an Ethiopian soldier or
Innocent
auxiliary
people.
soldier. Let's read it.
Streets. I'm Minister Plenid with the Republic's Diplomatic Corps. I was almost killed out there. The Kintan Kings gang controls this part of Nar Shaddaa. They're violent and well-armed Niktos who hate the Republic. The gang attacked me right out on the street in full view of everyone. My bodyguards were dead before I knew what was happening.
Where can I find these killers?
They're still outside, but I have worse news. The murders aren't the worst of it. My bodyguards all carry Republic passcodes, and now the gangsters have them. With those passcodes, the Kintan Kings can slip right through our security. We'll be defenseless.
Don't worry. I'll get those security passcodes back.
I fear a Jedi is the only one who can resolve this crisis. Recovering our security passcodes from those filthy criminals will save countless innocent lives, including mine. The Kintan Kings who shot my bodyguards are still outside the spaceport. They have the passcodes, I'm sure of it.
And when Severus, in a rage, ordered that the man be removed from his sight, troubled as he was by the man's ominous color and the ominous nature of the garland. So according to Septimus Severus, whether he was joking or he meant it, black skin was connected to dark omen. And I know that some people try to debunk this one, but it's not the only one we have. We have a similar interaction between Brutus and Cassius as they march to fight Octavianus and Antoninus at Philippi. We read, when the soldiers were going out to a fight, an Ethiopian met them in front of the gates, and they considered this a bad omen. They immediately cut him in pieces. Yeah, not racist at all. No. I mean, if that's not racist and physically racist, I don't know what is. We also read, an Ethiopian who met the troops as they were marching to battle was only too clearly an omen of disaster. So at least some Romans perceived certain phenotypic types to be a bad omen. They don't like the Nordic type, they don't like the Ethiopian. Still, in response to those that say, oh no, but Septimus Severus doesn't count, okay, well we have another story. In Historia Augusta, Septimus Severus is annoyed because in Luguallum, the city priest presents him with black sacrificial animals in response to his request to honor the gods with sacrifices. All of this is clear evidence that phenotypic traits were constantly noted and utilized by the Romans throughout their sources. On your video, you strive to discuss the differences between the modern usage of the word race, racism, and the ancient usage of it. Fair.
When we ask, what did the Romans think about race? We're doing so based on our own modern framing of that term. So what came before?
I reckon, however, that it's important to also spend the same amount of time and effort into explaining the fundamental difference between the modern meaning of the word cosmopolitan, which you do use to describe more than one classical city.
We know, for instance, how a cosmopolitan Rome bustled with people from across the known world.
And the ancient meaning of this word, particularly when contextualized in period. Just like the racial aspect, this is a key element of distinction when addressing Rome and modern society in a comparative key as you are. Let's discuss what it meant to be cosmopolitan in ancient Rome at an ontological level. Politics, society, and culture will act as a foil for this argumentation. Modernly, cosmopolitan has a dual meaning. In a looser sense, the modern way in which we understand the word when used in reference to a town is that said city contains a wide range of people from different countries, cultural backgrounds, religions, etc. I like Paris, I find a job in Paris, I'm not French, I moved to Paris, lots of other people do that for variable reasons. Paris is a cosmopolitan city. However, in a broader sense, modern philosophical theories of cosmopolitanism focus on the uniting features defining the world as a shared homeland for all mankind, hence expanding into the realm of equal rights together with the capacity to live with the element. Other. Note that in the modern sense there is usually an element of choice when it comes to the migrants in conjunction with governmental foreign policies. The Roman Empire instead is a political entity that conquered, expanded, and incorporated by military suppression. More concretely, Rome had subdued large parts of the known world, forcing the inhabitants of the conquered conquered regions to serve Rome, as you mentioned, paying taxes and accept Roman state cults. Rome was imperialistic, which is a clear-cut opposite to modern cosmopolitanism. This is why I think it's important when we use the word cosmopolitan to describe the cities of the last period, that we also underline the fact that an imperialistic society is riddled with inequality, and it's characterized by the dominion of an elite minority exploiting the masses. Consequently, from this perspective, the Imperium Romanum was not cosmopolitan at all. And yet I can also agree with you in the sense that when we look at Roman citizenship, it went from someone inhabiting the same city walls to the universal needs of an ever-expanding empire. Furthermore, we know that cosmopolitan ideologies were pushed by the likes of Cicero, who himself took them from the Stoics. The reality is that in Rome there is an intrinsic societal ambiguity where the authorities construct a dichotomy between cosmopolitanism and imperialism. Hence, the situation has socio-political compounding layers that, when addressed properly, can contribute to the correct interpretation of documented facts. In agreement with Invicta's usage of the term cosmopolitan, Roman society was not purely top-down, it was dynamic. The inhabitants of the provinces adopted Roman identity, but at the same time they kept their own, because Rome was, at the end of the day, relatively tolerant when compared to other empires. The ancient world was indeed culturally and physically interconnected. We know, for instance, that festival calendars were synchronized all over the Mediterranean basin. The Roman Empire and its cities had cosmopolitan elements, but Rome's elite and upper class actively exploited the provinces for personal gain. So yes, Rome or Alexandria were cosmopolitan in a sense, but ancient cosmopolitan discourse must be recontextualized and adapted to classical cosmopolitan frameworks. So, not a major point of disagreement, but just thought I'd add a bit of context to the words used. The sources do show an overall negative perception of alien phenotypic traits. Given, the sources do mostly focus on Nordic types, for example, excessive sweat of the Gauls, the pale white soft flesh. Empirical evidence suggests that Roman judgment moves indiscriminately between physical appearance and cultural aspects when judging and delineating other people and their value. For example, we are told that the Britons are all savages. They paint their body blue, walk around the marshes half naked. And to strengthen this idea of how much the Romans focused on physical appearance, Tacitus distinguishes the inhabitants of Britannia between those who lived in the lowland, the west, and the north, you guessed it, by physical appearance. The Bretons from the lowlands are similar to the Gauls, the northern ones are big and red-headed, so according to him they descend from the Germanic tribes. Those in the west, particularly the Siluri of modern Wales, are a dark complexion with curly hair. So to him, also due to the geographic position near the southwestern shore, they must be racially connected with the Iberians. Not to mention the passage in the Satyricon by Petronius. Check this out. This is a camouflage scene. Petronius writes, "Consider the plan I've discovered. Eumolpus certainly has some ink. Let's change our skin color from hair to nails with this paint in the guise of Ethiopian slaves. We will cheerfully serve you without painful fetters. We will fool our enemies with a change of skin color." Here's another character's reply to this proposal. "Or whiten our faces with chalk, so he thinks that we are citizens of Gaul." And then he ends, as if color alone could hide our looks. So I partially agree with your statement when you say they didn't really care as long as you paid taxes, but I think it's more profound than that, and it enters the political sphere. They don't care what you look like or how you speak, as long as you're not hostile to Rome. And the moment that people, whether it be white, whether it be black, becomes militarily hostile to the Romans, they go nuts on the sources and use everything they can to paint these people in the worst light possible, including phenotypic traits. The negativity perceived from a people that looked different is proportional to the ethnopolitical interaction with the state. So for some people, their racism, which was absolutely connected to both culture and the looks, had as a justification politics rather than genetics. Still racism. So Roman moral judgment is not uniquely based on
of Dr. Theron Cedrax. My name is Holiday, and I'm pleased to assist you. If you have an appointment, please make yourself comfortable while... Oh my goodness. It's rare to greet such a distinguished customer. I'd save your picture to my permanent drive, but that might upset my dear Theron.
If Theron can tear himself away from such a beautiful person, he deserves to be upset.
Very nice. But you lose points for the hesitation. I'm a fully sentient holographic life form, unique in the galaxy. Or so Theron says. You're a Jedi, aren't you? If you're here to see Theron, he's... Well, I've been waiting for him to get back. For hours and hours.
Perhaps he's delayed. Does he often just disappear?
No, never. We can't bear to be apart, you see. Theron had a special order to design a weapon, and the customer wanted him to deliver the prototype to the Nikto sector. The aliens there hate humans. The Republic... Hygiene. He should never have agreed to go.
With the Force on my side, I'll find him.
I promise. I'll be ever so grateful if you do. Nice. The meeting place is in the Nikto sector's Starship Chop Shop. It sounds like a nasty place. Please be careful.
Physical appearance alone, but on the relation with the people in question.
So yeah, even if this is just a character in a play, you can see where the conversation is headed. Some prejudices here are quite familiar to us. The idea of an immigrant people with a different language, strange music, and odd customs who poison a land that was once great. However, other prejudices seem quite farcical. For example, pants used to be a sign of the barbarian other, and no true Roman would be caught dead without their toga or tunic.
And once again, you say that appearance doesn't matter, and yet you just read that just having trousers could be enough to be discriminated. As a point of agreement with Invicta, I'll give him that at least some people felt the way he describes. For example, there is this incident between Emperor Claudius and the Senate when they are discussing whether or not to allow Gauls from Gallia Comata to enter the inner circle of power, the Senate. And there are many senators that oppose this vehemently. They don't want the Gauls from Gallia Comata to be considered Roman. Claudius responds. Among my ancestors, the older of which, Clausus of Sabine extraction, he was made citizen completely and head of a patrician family. There, I find the encouragement to adopt the same policy in my administration, transferring here all the real excellence wherever it may be. Without looking too far back, members of
This is disaster, Barish. How can I deal with enemies who don't negotiate?
La power golka, Doroni kuna wawunda domko.
Isn't Huttese the mother tongue of criminals across the galaxy?
Minister Planet sent word you were bringing our security passcodes. The Republic is in your debt. I'm Ambassador Averdon. This is Barish Fennec Toril, one of the system's most prominent business leaders. Welcome.
I was starting to wonder if the Republic was all alone here.
Far from it. Barish has been a great friend to the Republic in a dark time. My mission is to establish strong Republic ties on Nar Shaddaa. We need its technological assets to defend ourselves against the Empire. Nar Shaddaa's leaders sold us an entire sector to use as our base of operations. Unfortunately, it's overrun with Kintan King gangsters.
Their days are numbered. That's a promise.
I should warn you. These are no ordinary criminals. The Kintan Kings want us out of their territory, and they're winning. A Jedi who was helping us was found butchered in the open street. Those gangsters did horrible things to him.
Can you tell me how he died?
We are not certain, but there were strange cuts and markings on his body. Almost ritualistic. Morgukai are a Nikto cult. Jedi hunters trained to resist the Force.
Resisting the Force is one thing. Overcoming it is quite another.
Regardless, I thought I should warn you.
The gangsters' attack on Minister Plenid was a diversion. Their true goal was hijacking a Republic military freighter carrying cybernetic combat implants.
Eso poda no pachonki, fakutaji otovogisa.
We don't need Kintan Kings with enhanced speed and strength. When you have the implants, take them to an arms merchant named Nurculus. He secretly works for Barish.
Putura musta, wobrani tampio, tupushi wampa. Jeki, hasa, obobiska wampa huba.
The Senate were called from Etruria, from Lucania, from all over Italy, and that in the end Italy itself was extended until the Alps, so that not only individuals but countries and nationalities may form a single body under the name Romans. Are we complaining that the Balbi came here from Spain and equally illustrious families from Gallia Narborensis? What else was fatal for Sparta and Athens, regardless of their military might, if not their policy to keep the conquered distant as foreigners? Foreigners have been king among us, so presumably the Volsci and the Equi never did form a battle line against us. He's being sarcastic here. We were taken by the Gauls, but we have also given hostages to the Etruscans and were under Samnite yoke. Now that customs, culture and marriage have fused them with us, let them bring among us their gold and their riches instead of keeping them outside the circle. What's very interesting about this incident is not only the fact that, as you can see, Claudius was very open-minded when it came to accepting people into the fold as long as they brought money, gold and power with them, but that, of course, neither him nor his senatorial detractors ever mentioned phenotypic traits as one of the reasons why the Gauls from Gallia Narborensis shouldn't be allowed in, or the Gauls from Gallia Comata shouldn't be allowed in. No one is saying, well, yeah, but they look like giant mozzarella cheeses and they are extremely pale, whereas the Sabines and the Etruscans looked like us phenotypically. However, it's also possible that someone like Vitruvius would have brought up that as an argument. So it very much depended, kind of like today. Okay, in the section about slaves, I think what you are pretty much bringing forth is the idea that the farms with all the slaves in ancient Rome didn't look anything like the antebellum American farms. In other words, the Romans didn't just have black slaves. I agree with that. I want to say that the majority of slaves in ancient Rome would have very much looked like their masters, in the sense that the Greeks or the ones from modern-day Turkey, yeah, phenotypically would have looked like their masters. They would have had some Nordic slaves too, so those would have looked a bit different. And of course they would have had some black slaves, but within the general economy,
Kabanotase makipuna, malituta odmishka, jaskruni dopat kuripanta humpa.
They killed someone you...
At ambumpa o shura mokili o grani tampi mistuka mogotu.
You're not thinking clearly. You seek closure in your brother's death, but throwing your life away is not the answer.
Piti do tenya go kaka jujo. Toga wata kiko jonki fagut.
I'm not afraid of this guy.
Chusa yomata chumbahu.
of Rome, those would have been numerically minor elements. With that being said, I do disagree with this statement you make.
It's for this reason that people from antiquity were none too picky with whom they captured as slaves.
The Romans were extremely picky when it came to their slaves. If it's a heavy-duty slave or if it's a gladiator, yeah, anything would do. But if it's house slaves, personal family slaves, slaves that you would travel with, they wanted them Greek. We know from the sources that a Greek slave was valued because They were expected to come educated, they could read, write, do math, and it also was extremely fashionable for Roman families to have expensive Greek slaves. So much so that we know, and we are told as we read the sources, that some Roman families, even though perhaps they took a slave and he wasn't Greek, they would give him a Greek name so that they could pretend that the slave was Greek, because it made them look more wealthy and successful and educated, so that when they had guests in their homes, the guests would see that the Roman family owner would call his Greek slave with a Greek name, and everyone would be like, oh wow, I'm so impressed. So no, the Romans were very picky. Last but not least, I'd like to spend a word or two on this last final point that you made, whereby you want to show the fact that the Romans didn't really look at the way you looked when it came to emperors, because you show a map and you tell me, you see, Roman emperors came from all of these territories, and so I suppose you're trying to say that the Romans didn't care what you looked like, you could become an emperor.
As another data point regarding the idea of racial discrimination, I'd like to point to this map, which shows how Rome's own emperors hailed from lands across the empire.
That is a little bit of a yes and no statement. Let's remember that regardless of where you were born, as long as it was within the empire, you could become an emperor. Still, you had to have ties with powerful families. And a lot of these areas and territories that you show that are of course outside of Italy don't take into consideration that a lot of these emperors were still connected or even born from Italian families that were living in provincial land. And even those who weren't fully Italian, like for example the emperors that were born in North Africa. I know this is going to upset many people, but let's go out and say Septimus Severus was not black. In conclusion, I think it's very important when discussing these matters to have a certain level of critical self-reflection about the way we conduct and construe our own scientific practices and approaches, particularly when dealing with the way people thought, mental patterns, rhetorical devices, and societal factors in the ancient world. And I make this video not only as a way to remind you of that, but also to remind myself of this. It's very difficult to be impartial and to remove our own modern filters, but it is important to do so. Alright, but I hope that you noble ones enjoyed this video. Again, hello to Invicta, and go check him out, subscribe, leave a comment, and say hi from the community of noble ones. Thank you very much for watching, and remember, the Metatron has spread its wings. Goodbye.
Yes, Russia being sanctioned can't import cars from Europe and Japan. It has indeed become the market with the most Chinese branded cars. In the first half of 2023, products from Chinese-funded automakers reached sales of 168 units in the Russian market, accounting for 49% of Russia's market share. Of the top 10 in new car sales, 6 spots are occupied by these brands. But here's a little scoop. 80% of these vehicles aren't even manufactured in China. They're produced in countries that are part of the Russia-led Eurasian Economic Union, EAEU. That means these cars are assembled in Russia, Belarus, or Kazakhstan. To be more specific, Chery, which is the second most popular brand, assembles its cars in Belarus. Great Wall's Haval is produced in Russia. Only Geely imports all its cars to the Russian market directly from China. These three Chinese car brands have been heavily influenced by technological developments from Europe, America, Japan, and South Korea. Their technological foundation is by no means weak. However, with their growing sales in Russia, complaints about these brands have also increased by 35%. According to a survey by local Russian institutions, 44% of Russian consumers believe that the metal materials used in Chinese cars are too thin or the components are not suitable. 42% pointed out metal tourism issues, believing that these cars are not adapted to Russia's cold winters. 29% felt that the electronic products and components used in Chinese cars are of lower quality. 28% complained that the suspension is too soft for Russian roads. Furthermore, 24% of consumers believe that the paint coating on Chinese cars is not robust. The core issue lies in the choice of materials and the difference in manufacturing standards. In China, it seems by constantly upgrading emission standards, cars meet the scrapping criteria in just 5 to 6 years. Thus, Chinese automakers might not prioritize long-term durability during design. Coupled with China's relatively mild climate compared to Russia, there may not have been significant emphasis on cold resistance and specialized material treatment. When such vehicles are introduced to Russia's frigid environment, they may face issues in a short time, highlighting the characteristic, quote, filthy dregs engineering of Chinese manufacturing. In Russia, Chinese cars are often called, quote, tin cans for their flimsy body and uncomfortable rattling interiors. They're also known as, quote, coffins on wheels for their low safety standards. Alexander Smolin, who lives in Yekaterinburg, said, quote, I'd rather buy an old Mercedes
My
than a
results
new
were
Chinese
less than
car
ideal,
whose name I
Master.
can't
There
even
is
pronounce.
no excuse for
I
this
will
failure.
never
Be an
switch to a
imbecile. The
Chinese
weapons
car.
obviously might. If you use it against the Hut Cartel, I'll be looking for my vertebrae in a trash compactor. Deal's off.
Manchi doti puna puna. Kabuk nuni snemo.
Let's not let this fall to violence.
Chobot I kafstuan bile jihulo kuta.
I'm begging you, please don't get him started on this again.
O grani tampio da pushi wompa. Putula musta.
What does the Hut Cartel have to do with this darkness?
Piti dotenya go kaka jujo. Da biska ku paliya. Kabanotase makipuna. Mali tuta odmishka.
I dislike being told what to do.
Wonki atacha kapa donka. Jisa picha.
That was gratifying. You rarely see delinquents getting their just desserts on this world. I'd have talked him around eventually, but I won't say no to heavily armed assistance. Unless you can mount intelligence on a wall, I'm afraid I wouldn't be a very tempting target.
I just saved your life. A little gratitude wouldn't be out of place.
My apologies. This has all been very trying. Theron Cedrax, professor and exo-engineer at your service. Not that many around here respect my genius, especially those Nikto. Challenge the Hut Cartel? Pfft. Where'd they get such delusions of grandeur?
I think you know the man responsible.
So Duras Fane has a vendetta against the Hut Cartel. If any Jedi Master would risk it, Fane's the one. That's why I was right. If the Hutts find out Fane is behind this guiding hand business, it'll leave the Republic high and dry.
Master Sio said you could help me find him.
Unfortunately, it's been years since we last spoke. But if Fane is using Nar Shaddah's gangs, perhaps that's our opening. I know a local gang, the Red Light Lancers. A bunch of tech specialists and slicers of ill repute. Rumor is, they're part of this guiding hand.
I need to be in that gang. A Jedi Master wouldn't need slicers unless he was planning something big.
I suspect you're right. But you'll need to prove your expertise. I suppose this prototype would do it, though I hate to part with it.
Your genius will stop a rogue Jedi Master.
I wish I was immune to flattery. Here. And here. I always wear an earpiece at handover so I can call my assistant Holiday. With this, we can speak privately. Here's the location. I'll return to my office. If Fane is using some kind of mind control, I have research to do.
Ilya Korbutyak, a car owner from Moscow, talked about his disappointment after recently driving a brand new Cherry Tiggo 7 crossover. Quote, imagine you're in the front passenger seat and you're feeling air on your legs, even though the ventilator is turned off, he said. He attributed the problem to a silly defect, a loose rubber seal. Quote, that means dust and exhaust fumes in the passenger compartment, and in winter you had better get into this car dressed in warm shoes and clothing. Regardless, it's quite unpleasant, he said. Quote, I'm convinced that many who buy Chinese models are 100% guaranteed to face various unpleasant surprises. A taxi driver from Russia remarked that, post the Russia-Ukraine conflict, he had driven several Chinese cars. In his opinion, when compared to the Škoda he purchased in 2022, these Chinese cars noticeably lacked driving stability. This is a sentiment widely shared. In the Russian taxi industry, most drivers prefer brands like Hyundai, Kia, and particularly Renault's Logan, especially the Renault Logan, an original French model. Many of these vehicles can run up to 500,000 kilometers without major repairs, making it a favorite among Russians. According to Russian automotive experts, Chinese cars perform decently on smooth asphalt roads. However,
Welcome to Nurculus Arms. If it shoots, stabs, fries, or detonates, I stock it. I see you've got Berish's combat implants. He'll be a happy hut. I gotta say, I expected a lot more Jedi after the Kintan King slaughtered that other one. You're all they sent?
I'm just looking to pass the time.
People like you keep people like me in business, and I really appreciate it. One thing's for sure, the Mountain won't be happy when he finds out what you did. That's what they call the Kintan King's leader, by the way. The Mountain. 3 guesses why.
He must be very tall.
Wookiees are tall. The Mountain ducks when clouds pass overhead. Only thing the Kintan Kings fear is the Mountain. He's everywhere, all the time.
How is such a thing even possible?
All I know is, the Mountain has a reputation for staying on top of things. Just take care that you're not one of them. Say, since we're being so cordial and sharing, maybe we can discuss a little side business. Those combat implants are first-rate merchandise. We could, score a sweet profit selling a few in the black market.
Do you make a habit of cheating your employer?
Of course not. That would get me killed. I only profit when opportunity knocks. I'll tell Barish the Kintan Kings used some combat implants before you raided them. He'll believe me as long as you don't disagree. What Barish doesn't know won't hurt him, and that'll make us richer. Sound good?
I'm pleased that we could reach an agreement.
Great. Hey, that's Barish on the holo. Just play it cool. Bad news, boss. Couldn't get back all those combat implants. The Kintan Kings must have used a few.
We intercepted a holo message ordering the Kintan Kings to protect their slave market. They're selling kidnapped Republic citizens.
You best be certain about this.
Our people have been disappearing for weeks. I thought they were being murdered. But now we know better. Some of the kidnapping victims are Force-sensitive children who are passing through here on their way to the Jedi. I shudder to think what those criminal scum have in mind for the children.
That sounds like trouble.
The Sith Empire is always looking for new children to train on Korriban. Barish believes the gang's slave market is in the ruins of an old casino.
Bumicha kulka dumaji taus azalas uval.
It's time to finish this.
Kutsinangjiere jatoni ma kechu.
There is no need to discuss this further. Please hurry. Free our people before it's too late.
What's your pinky? Womi topi.
There, pretty tired. I don't know if I'll be on tomorrow or tomorrow night, so catch then. Bye.